Hi, thanks for joining me and welcome back to the channel. So today's video I'm going to be talking about Jethro Tull's Benefit, which is their third album released after this was. I'll run through a little bit more of the history of this in a little while, and Stand Up, and this was the album before Aqualung. This release here is from Analogue Productions, which is Chad Kassem's company, based in Salina, Kansas, and they are a high quality audiophile kind of record label. They have their own record pressing plant, QRP, which is arguably the best in the world. There's no question in my mind that at best they are equaled by other record plants, but I don't think there's anything that eclipses QRP. And they typically use the very, very highest quality mastering engineers and cut from the original analog tapes wherever possible. Frankly, if the source isn't up to the job, they won't release a title. It's as simple as that. So what we've got here is we've got the original analog master tapes. Now I'll get on to a bit more detail about that later, but I think we're talking the American masters, and this is cut by Matthew Luthens at 45 RPM to produce a 2 LP album. And I'll just show you these are the records. Obviously there's two of them being 45 RPM, and they are, they're 180 gram. It's absolutely superb quality vinyl, and these are, spoiler alert, these are stunning sounding records. They really are. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jethro Tull and a little bit about my experience with this album. I certainly am a fan of Jethro Tull, and this is my original. Okay, now eagle-eyed viewers will notice this is a giveaway here. This isn't a UK original. This is actually a German original. I have had a UK original. Well, I think it was probably a UK sort of second pressing or something like that. It was on the green Chrysalis label, the same as the Analogue Productions discs I just showed you, this label here. And actually the UK original would be on this green Chrysalis label, okay? But anyway, the reason I've got this German one is because, let me show you here. This is the album, and as you can see, this is on the old island black and orange sort of eye symbol. This was subsequently replaced by the sort of the black block label, which was sort of black down here. It had this sort of symbol in the middle, and then the third pink label, Island, had a white letter I down here. And I found this and I thought, oh wow, that's interesting, and bought it. And it's, I think it probably sounds similar to a UK original, but I will say that Benefit for me is not the best sounding Tull album. Now, Tull was formed sort of in the northwest of England, and I think that Mick Abrams, a blues guitarist, he was certainly one of the founder members. I kind of got the impression it was his band initially, if you like. Certainly it was, between him and Ian Anderson, the who everyone will know, I'm sure, who was the band leader from their second album onwards. Anyway, this is just a phenomenal album. It's absolutely one of my favourite. I think it's one of those records you can just pick up and put on anytime you like. It fits every mood. It's beautiful. Anyway, then Mick Abrams left, and Ian Anderson sort of took over as the band leader. He was always kind of the front man, vocalist, flautist, flute player, for those who would prefer. And Stand Up was a great album, a little bit less bluesy, I would say, than this was, and a little bit sort of medieval folky. And with Benefit, we're kind of moving another step more down that road. I would say there's definitely a sort of a bluesiness to Benefit, but it's also, I think, it's possibly their most psychedelic album. They're moving from a blues, sort of blues rock band through sort of, medieval folk psychedelia, kind of into folk prog, folk rock, medieval prog, whatever you want to call it. They're a fairly unique band, and I think I've got everything they did from This Was up until Heavy Horses, which was late 70s. Bursting Out was a live double they did after Heavy Horses. After that, I think the Broadsword and the Beast and Stormwatch, and I was losing interest at that point in time, let's say. But they had pretty much the same lineup from the album after this until the end of the 70s. So you've got this very sort of, phenomenal lineup, very individual musicians that really see them from sort of Aqualung, which followed Benefit, all the way through to Bursting Out. They are an awesome band, basically. There's an awesome band, but this would not have been in my top 4 or 5, say, even though it's a very, very interesting album. And I say that because it's probably the most psychedelic of the whole catalogue. Now the lineup on this, we've got Glenn Cornick on bass, okay, Clive Bunker on drums, Martin Barr on lead guitar, and Ian Anderson on flute and vocals and acoustic guitar. And there might be odd things like marimbas or whatever, And there's a guy called John Evan who plays piano and organ on here, and he subsequently became a full-time member of the band, but he's not listed as such at this point in time. Okay, so one thing I would say about Jethro Tull, right from the word go with This Was all the way through to sort of Bursting Out, is they have just got a phenomenal drive and groove to them. Absolutely phenomenal. And for me, it's kind of led by the bass and the drums. And this is why I find this sort of an intriguing thing, because the way this album just propels along, the tunefulness and the melody of the bass is just absolutely phenomenal. And that's Glenn Cornick, who's this chap here. And he was sacked after the recording of this album and replaced by a guy called Jeffrey Hammond, who played with them for another 3 or 4 years, and then he was replaced again by a guy called John Glascock. The drums on this, again, I wouldn't say they're not, they're certainly not in-your-face drums, but it's the way the drums and the bass play together. It is just utterly captivating. So the drums on this, Clive Bunker, he only lasted a couple more years, and then was replaced by Barrymore Barlow, who saw them out to the end of the 70s. And they just have a sound, and that sound is pretty consistent, even though this is far more sort of psychedelic than some of the later albums. I think it kind of gets, with Aqualung, it becomes far more sort of prog rocky, a bit more heavy. They're firmly in the sort of prog vein, but definitely with a folk rock, almost medieval colour to them. Absolutely beautiful band, beautiful songwriting, and amazing performances, and definitely kind of not. And this particular album, I would say, is the most in this respect, but definitely not what I would call hi-fi. Now, on this original first track, you've got With You There to Help Me, and then the second track, Nothing to Say. Those two tracks have quite a different sort of sound to them. The opening track, Ian Anderson, is really quite far at the back of the soundstage, and his vocal kind of sounds a bit like that. It really is. It's a beautiful vocal, but it's kind of quite muffled, and his flute, again, it's sort of at the back, and I think this is part of the psychedelic kind of feel to it. It's creating a mood and a feeling and a sort of a swishy sort of soundscape, if you like, that involves this sort of blending and melding and fading out and veiling and muffling, if you like. So with You There to Help Me, it's got incredible melodies, but it is, it's not the world's, it's definitely not what I would call a hi-fi recording. It's the vocals are a bit muffled, whereas Nothing to Say, the vocal is much more at the front and much more clear and projected. And that's something that, sort of every other track on this album it's just sort of, on the original, it's just phenomenal music, but just a little bit lacking sonically. So, if your real thing is music and interesting and intriguing and different and challenging music, I think this is an absolute killer album. If you kind of find things that are a bit, the engineering, the mix, the production is a little bit sort of grungy, muffled, challenging, then I think this album would challenge you. And that is where the Analogue Productions version comes in and transforms the thing. So now I'm going to get on and talk about that Analogue Productions version. And for starters, I'm going to talk about the track listing. I know most of my viewers are actually from the States, so most of you won't actually know the UK album. We've got side one, With You There to Help Me, phenomenal sort of bluesy, prog, psychedelic-y kind of track. Nothing to Say is next, which again is just staggering. And then Alive and Well and Living In, the next track. Sun, which is, it's probably not my favourite track on the album. It's like a two-part sort of, quite sort of acousticy and then full-on heavy kind of track. And then again, very typical of Tull at this era, just for this album, this track here, For Michael Collins, Jeffrey and Me. The melodies, the melodic, the lyricism of it, the cadences, the way they build tracks and arrange music is stunning. Okay, so that's side one. Side two, To Cry You a Song, again an absolute beautiful song. A Time for Everything, Inside, which is possibly my favourite track on the album, Play in Time, and Society, You're a Woman. And then what we've got on the American version on this Analogue Productions is basically we've got side one of the album is pretty much as it was, except you've got Inside, which as I said is possibly my favourite, which is sort of halfway through side two of the B-side. That comes in as track three, so sort of halfway through side one of the A-side. Okay, and the track that was there, Alive and Well and Living In, is pushed to the end of side two. And then what else you've got is you have got, in place of Inside on side two, you've got the track Teacher, which wasn't on the UK album. It was a B-side of the single, which is Promise, I think. And the first time Teacher was released in the UK was on the double compilation album Living in the Past. And it was also released on MU Best Of, which is, I think that was the first Tull album I actually had. Teacher is a phenomenal song, and its addition is welcome. There is absolutely no question about that. So you get one more song and they rejig the track listing a bit, and it took me a couple of listens to sort of get comfortable with the new track listing, and it's not completely mixed up. It is just you've taken Inside from the middle of side two and put it to the middle of side one, and then you've put Teacher in its place in the middle of side two, and you've pulled Alive and Well and Living In from the middle of side one and put it at the end of side two. So it's not, it's a little bit mixed up, but that's basically the difference. But that's not why you buy this album. The reason for getting this is the sound, and that's where I think it's an absolute no-brainer, because I mentioned already the sound of the bass on this, and it is just how they could have replaced Glenn Cornick after this it baffles me. I think his bass playing makes the album almost. And you've got that bass and it absolutely captivates. It's so tuneful and it drives all of the tunes. Now, that's still there, and there's a little bit more definition to the bass, and there's a little bit more sort of openness to it. So the best element, if you like, is maintained and just slightly improved. And I would say anyone who's got has heard a 45 RPM version of something that's also available at 33 will know that there is typically just a bit more openness, a little bit more precision, a little bit more definition, a little bit more tunefulness, a little bit more detail. And this is no exception. So the bass is a little bit better. The drums, on the other hand, again, they've all got those little bit better. But what you do get on this, which makes a more significant improvement than just a little bit, is the kick drum. And again, this is something that I've found is quite a constant amongst Analogue Productions 45 RPM recuts. That kick drum thud, you can really keep it rather than sort of roll it off as you would do to press a normal record. Regular viewers will know that I've got full range studio monitor speakers, the Acoustic K100s, and they're flat in my room down to well below 20, about 15-16 hertz. And so the thump that you get from that kick drum, it just really enhances that whole bass drum driving rhythm thing. And then the third element of the rhythm thing is Martin Barr's guitar, and it's, you know, obviously he's lead guitar, but it's ferocious the way he plays. I mean, at times it's, you know, like medieval minstrel and very sort of lyrical and dancey and delightful, and other times it's just you know, it's a thundering kind of rocky driving kind of gritty grinding kind of thing, and that's really opened up on this. But the thing that is just the icing on the cake of this Analogue Productions cut, the absolute icing on the cake, is what happens to Ian Anderson's vocal and the flute. Because where on the original, where on half the tracks is sort of a bit like this, and it's a bit sort of, you know, and Ian will sing at least two vocal parts for probably half of the singing on the album, where he's overdubbing himself. There may even be sort of three or more at times. You get that, you really can hear that. But even, you know, no matter what's going on, it's so much clearer. And the flute as well, I mentioned it, the sort of the psychedelic kind of like, kind of just very sort of just, you know, sounds. The way it's sort of, you know, his vocal and the flute, it's sort of sounds and textures and layers, and very sort of creamy and a bit sort of muted and muffled and veiled. This is just, it's raised up, and there's a light and an openness and an energy and a dynamism in the soundstage that doesn't leave anything sounding dark and smeary. It's absolutely phenomenal. Transforms the album, frankly. Now, I will just take this out of here because I want to just show you the really beautiful cover. Absolutely solid, crisp, high quality, decent card. 2 records pressed on beautiful vinyl, all analog, all from the Analog Masters, and it absolutely makes this one unplayable. There's no question. This is the new reference standard for me, and I've got, you know, I just don't think there's any reason to keep hold of this one. I know that this is 45 RPM, and that does actually give something. So I know that if Analogue Productions made a 33 RPM version of this, it wouldn't be as good. I still wish they would, because I know for an awful lot of people they can't be doing with changing the record halfway through the sides and changing speed. But this is so good that I can imagine if they did do a 33, it would still annihilate the original. But this here It's more captivating, it's more entrancing, it's more involving. And there's a funny thing, even though you've got to get up and change sides 3 times because you've got 4 sides, compared with changing sides once, when you put this on, there's more urgency to it. So it's more of a chore to listen to this one. When you put this on, you play the first 2 tracks, you have to get up and change the side, then there's 3, then you get up and change the side again, there's another 3, you get up, change sides again, and there's another 3 tracks. But you're on it, you're excited, you're enthralled and inspired. With this one, yeah, sure, you've got 5 tracks each side, I think it is, but it sounds a bit more turgid. It's not as, it just isn't as good a sounding album by any means, not even close. So this is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, 100% recommended. It's given me a really enjoyable copy of what was, musically one of the most, in a way, out there and interesting Jethro Tull albums out, but the sonic qualities of the original just never ever allowed me to really get into it. Okay, so a phenomenal record, 100%. Well done, Chad, keep it up, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye now. Bye.